In December, an unidentified migrant died in a Canadian Border Services Agency detention center in Laval after being in a state of medical distress. The incident, one of many, is raising questions about Canada's treatment of undocumented migrants and refugee claimants. On February 13th, a crowd gathered to protest dangerous living conditions and a lack of transparency outside the Laval detention center.
Since the start of the pandemic, there's already been two separate hunger strikes carried out by detainees there. So essentially, the migrants detained there have been sounding the alarms about the conditions there for years now. We don't really know anything about the circumstances of this person's death because, of course, the CBSA themselves refuses to disclose any information about it. But what we do know is that this person died alone on the floor of a cell, and no matter what the circumstances or the reasons that they died, that just didn't have to be the case.
The incident was one example of the dangerous and precarious conditions faced by migrants who come to Canada. They face everything from indefinite detentions to abuse from employers who can dismiss them at a moment's notice. Wage theft from workers vulnerable to deportation is rampant.
Under criminal law, there's a whole host of reasons why someone has detained, and they have rights, including the right to a certain limited time within detention. Whereas immigration detention is indefinite. They're not given a sentence when they first are detained. They're not told you're going to be held for 6 years or 6 months. So once they go into the system, it becomes very difficult for them to get out of the system. And there is very little oversight over the system. There's very few cases where there's criminality involved. Usually it's identity documents, or because they feel like the person is a flight risk, that they won't go and report to an immigration hearing. And so, to detain people is a serious deprivation of liberty, is a serious human rights issue. And we're doing it regularly in Canada without a lot of oversight.
So for the migrants that are able to cross the border, what are the difficult realities they may face while living here? Rivo Resilience, a professor and researcher who immigrated to Canada from Mexico, now fights for migrant rights through Montreal organization Solidarity Across Borders. Rivo Resilience sees the common realities undocumented people face.
And they arrive here, they learn that sometimes the employer doesn't follow the rules. They just don't respect the agreements, right? The contracts. And so they had to decide between returning without anything to their places, to being actually, or to stay here to try to survive and to make some money. And so that's an example, I would say, of how public policy can produce illegality, literally, can push people to do things that they wouldn't do in other circumstances.
Sarah, who uses a pseudonym to protect her identity, is a migrant without status living in Montreal. She came to Canada from Hong Kong after working there for 8 years. She left as a result of not being able to sponsor her child from her home country, the Philippines. Sarah, who works as a live-in nanny, took care of her male employer and his son while they had COVID-19 last fall. She says she was not given a medical gown, an N95 mask, and was only provided with gloves, and used her own cloth mask that she bought herself.
It was inevitable that I also sick with COVID-19. And as soon as the test came back with positive results, my employers told me that I was so long needed that I had lived to the very next morning. I called the organization for me to help to find a quarantine. The agent had told me when I called the public health that it takes a few days to arrange. But in the very morning, my employers threatened me and called the police.
Sarah says she was only paid for 8 hours a day despite working 14 hours daily. So how does this type of treatment affect migrants?
The effects of deportability is the fear of being deported make people docile to have to endure any kind of abuse, and it creates a lot of issues not only in the workplace but also in the spiritual life, the mental health, the physical health of people. People who go through the experience of deportability for a long time develop several mental and physical health constraints, including, feelings of not being a deserving person, low self-esteem, nightmares.
Last month, a family of 4 originating from India froze to death in Manitoba while trying to cross the US-Canadian border. Death as a result of migrating is not new, as many migrants have died trying to come to Canada or other countries.
What is being called the deadliest migrant tragedy on record in the English Channel.
Last November, 27 migrants died while attempting to cross the English Channel between France and the United Kingdom. Circumstances such as these draw attention to not only the risk migrants take to come to another country, but how eager they are. Human rights violations, conflict, persecution, and violence causes desperation for many to find new life in another country.
The RCMP is obligated to tell them with one step across they will be arrested. But still, if they can slip into Canada, they will be considered for asylum status. And that sliver of hope is enough for desperate people.
So why do some migrants illegally cross borders?
You cannot make a claim at a border crossing. Otherwise, you're sent back to the United States. So therefore, you're required to cross irregularly to therefore make a claim. And by crossing irregularly, you're violating administrative law because you're crossing at a non-official border crossing. And so this criminalizes, because in order to actually get to Canada to make the claim, it's requiring people to do something irregular or criminal under administrative law in order to get access. So this is one example of the criminalization. A second example is when people are not able to get a visa to come to Canada but want to make an asylum claim in Canada, that this then allows for some process of smuggling. So basically, people have to pay off transportation companies or other individuals in order to get to Canada to make the claim, even though they have fraudulent documents or documents or non-existent documents. And so this is another way in which people are being forced to violate law in order to gain access to asylum in Canada.
Migrants can often be demonized in the media, in public discourse, or even by politicians. Just last December, Quebec Immigration Minister Jean Boulet tweeted that Ottawa should assume its responsibilities and halt irregular border crossings by asylum seekers at unauthorized border point Roxham Road in the face of another COVID-19 wave. Some identified that this discourse puts forth the idea that migrants are causing the spread of COVID-19, despite many calls that the government's decision to divest money from the healthcare system has led to a collapsing system.
This is a worldwide trend. I also think it's been exacerbated by COVID. So COVID-19 has given countries a public health reason for closing borders. And some of us are concerned that once borders are closed or hardened, it becomes more difficult to open or soften those borders in the future.
Why they cannot just give us a permanent status right when we were landed in here?
Our immigration system is very much still based on a class-based privilege. You know what person was very big fan of the Canadian immigration system? It was Trump. Because in the United States, when you arrive undocumented, for example, with the time you develop the right to apply, and then the way in which is decided if you are deserving of path to permanent residence or not is through lottery, literally through lottery. It's by luck. And here in Canada, it's by points. So really, if you don't have, like, the points is because you have particular age, you have abilities for speaking English and French, and so on and so forth and so. And the United States is not like that. You are right, however you are right, you have the right to apply, and luck is going to decide when you're going to become a citizen, a resident. That's more democratic, really.
A migrant can only make an asylum claim in the first country that they arrive at, whether it be the US or Canada. And so this makes it very difficult for people to cross at a formal border crossing because if they do and they want to claim asylum, they'll be sent back to the United States. And so this is why we see irregular crossings, especially around, for example, Roxham Road near Montreal, because people can't go through an official border crossing if they want to make an asylum claim, because they'll simply be sent back to the United States, with very few exceptions.
For migrants experiencing distress, mental or physical illness, help is out there. Médecins du Monde provides free health services for people without health insurance. MDM does not officially provide mental health services. However, they may recommend you to a specialist. Call 514-523-6322 to book an appointment. Messages can be left in English, French, or Spanish. For more mental health support services for migrants, check the caption below.